Well, people hate puzzles, but in reality, it's going to be a bit more than that. So let's begin. So you may be wondering who am I? I am well. I made some puzzle games in the past, but well, and I am also from Bolivia. That's notably very far from Greece, but we are going to see about that. But let's say I'm just a concerned puzzle games fan. But this story begins last year when I was watching ThinkyCon, and well, this always starts with the talk from Dom Camus that, and he starts talking about the Guardian Knot. And this is an interesting story. Well, I think everyone should know about that, but just a recap. There was uh, this was about Alexander the Great, and he wanted to conquer Greece, I think, or something like that. But there was a legend that if he solved a very complex knot, he will become the king of Europe or something like that. and but the thing is that he comes and instead of solving the knot, he uses his sword and he cuts through it. Basically, he cheeses the puzzle. This was just cheese. so and that's the idea that he escapes the puzzle, and at least that's how they tell the story. But turns out that was not the full story, and that's the interesting part about what about last year's talk. In reality, there are more tellings of this story, and there are variations. And in some of the variations, he actually solves the knot. He solves the puzzle, and that was that was really something. For in my case, it really broke me. This is not exactly a rebuttal or a sequel to the talk from Don Camus last year, but it just made me think a lot about things. Well, if you didn't see that talk, I recommend it because it was very good. But let's go. And the reason this broke me is that, well, this story about the Gordian knot, it's something that, well, I even remember that at least a couple of teachers from my school days will, when they wanted to grab attention from the class, they will talk about some stories like this. And well, I guess the idea was to inspire us or to tell us about parallel thinking and that stuff. So, and and it's really interesting that, well, we are not in Greece. Most of us don't live in ancient Greece, but we still hear about this. And but at the end, it turns out that it was maybe it's not even close to being the true story. Maybe and it's really interesting that the popular version of the story is the one in which he doesn't really solve the knot. Instead, he does something to escape the solution. But maybe what really causes causes those problems in my head is that, well, at least when that happened was that I thought, I thought of it as a confirmation that people hate puzzles. And maybe you are surprised to hear that, but that's how it went. Mm, maybe when, well, we all love puzzle games, but maybe we sometimes have to face this reality. Does everyone hate puzzle games? Maybe we can argue about that for a bit. And maybe someone will come and tell us, well, some puzzle games are really popular. How could it be that people hate puzzle games in that case? Let's talk about Portal, for example. In that case, I will tell you, well, for some reason, Portal is really popular, but it's not. It's almost as if it needed more things in order to be popular. It needed a great story, a great character like GLaDOS. The memes became famous about that, and sometimes it also feels like, but at least in my case, the first introduction to this puzzle game was the memes, the cake is alive, etc. Um, okay, so maybe we can talk about other things. Even Nintendo make puzzle games, and they are a company that's very concerned about mainstream appeal. They make games that appeal to everyone, every age, and but something about that is I keep thinking about, for example, maybe Tears of Wisdom last year. Um, that was an interesting game because to me it's a really. Let me see if you can check this. Maybe you can check. Hopefully you can see this, and it's a very. It's really rich in mechanics. To me, it's a puzzle game, and it's very interesting in that aspect. But it's also interesting in that when Nintendo want to make a puzzle game and they want to make it mainstream, they try really hard to hide the fact that it's a puzzle game. They added a lot of things that make it an adventure game. They added items. There are many ways to skip the puzzles, and it's understandable. You don't want you don't want a lot of friction with like we're saying there has to be mainstream appeal. So in a lot of ways, it's a puzzle game that doesn't want to be a puzzle game. Maybe that's one way to say it. But maybe the real reason I keep thinking, well, people really hate puzzles is my experience with Super Mario Maker. Just well, maybe not everyone is familiar, but it's a game published by Nintendo where it's a level editor for typical Mario levels. And the cool thing about that is that, well, of course, everyone found a way to create puzzles with it. Uh, but what's interesting about this is that the there are two popular kinds of puzzle levels in Mario Maker, and one of them is the one screen puzzles. This is a whole level, a whole Mario Maker level, and it's a puzzle. And that's the idea about this game of puzzle games, of puzzle levels. Sorry, you can see, well, everything is in one screen, and it's very short. And maybe if we want to be contrarian about this, we will say these are popular because at least they are short, right? At least that way people don't really. It doesn't really need to test people's patience. There are also another kind of puzzle levels in Mario Maker. That's the troll levels. And just by saying this, I think I might get in trouble with Mario Maker people, but um troll levels are puzzle levels, but they are puzzle levels in which they are, once again, they are trying, they don't want to admit they are puzzle levels, and they have to have this this layer on top of them that's pretending that you are torturing the player, and streamers play them because it's funny for them to experience this torture. That's the level, but in reality they are puzzle levels, but no one wants to admit they are puzzle levels. But really, well, the real reason I am talking about Mario Maker here is that I made a lot of levels in Mario Maker, and I had some interesting experiences about that. One of the things Mario Maker does is that hopefully you can see here there's a lot of red X's in the screen. This is an example of a feature in the it can show you this screen when you are the one that made the level, and you can see all of the points. They call it failure points, and these are the points where people where the players decided to quit the level. So this is a very interesting way to see where are the friction points. I couldn't find the specific level where I noticed this, because well, really, it was an old level from the first Mario Maker, and I don't even have my Wii U anymore. But this is just an anecdote about this, that uh, whenever you were, if you try to if you try to make a level, let's call it a traditional platforming level, uh, and you included every time you included every bit, just a small bit of a puzzle mechanic in between quotes, even if it was something simple like you have to take this object to this other place, instead of just moving in a linear way, and solving the platforming in a linear way, it will immediately create a lot of friction, and that will usually be the place where the players will quit the level. And okay, that was that was a real learning moment for me, because I had to learn to really segregate. If I wanted to have puzzle stuff, I needed to make sure the level was a puzzle level, and there was complete separation between the puzzle stuff, a puzzle level, and an adventure level. And if not, then it will be really unpopular. It wouldn't even be played, and that's how it works. And it got to the point that one time I tried to make this level, and this is the this is the final screen of the level, and the the main goal I had with this level was to I just wanted to make a funny level where there was a moral dilemma. And in this case, if you beat the level, if you go to the axe here, it will solve the level. But whenever you use the axe, this metal stuff at the bottom of the level will it falls, and it kills Yoshi, the green dinosaur here. And normally players don't like killing Yoshi. But if you don't want to do that, you need to go to Yoshi and make sure to ride Yoshi and take Yoshi with you to the exit. But in this level, that's not possible. You have to go to the vine here, this green plant here, and in the top level, in the top area of this level, there's a puzzle, and you just need to solve the puzzle. And when you do that, these squares will be filled by blocks, and you can take Yoshi with you. So it sounds very simple, uh, and I am just noticing that I am very late. We are we are running late, but just give me 2 minutes if possible. But well, in reality, this was a very simple puzzle, but nobody really, not a lot of people will do that, and a lot of people needed to sacrifice Yoshi. And I can tell because we got comments, and in a lot of comments they mentioned how they had to kill Yoshi. Well, that was part of the fun with the level, but it's very interesting that I had to do that. I was able to do that because um, this idea of creating a moral dilemma and making the player make that choice, this is not the first iteration where I tried to do that, but the most successful one was to make them choose between saving Yoshi and solving a level. I have to speed up, so sorry. Um, um, well, maybe if you see me taking this very personally, maybe even I have a story of not really hating puzzle games, but for some reason there are games that where I started playing them and really in this screen you can see a lot of icons. I love most of these puzzles, but I had to skip them. Uh, it's more that sometimes you are playing a game and with time you don't finish the game, and that's what happens. There's a long history of games I didn't finish, but I am supposed to love them, but for some reason they don't take me to the end of the journey, and it's really weird that I couldn't. This is not even the full list, right? I tried to come up with the complete list of puzzle games that I couldn't finish yet, and not really because, and for various reasons, but mostly because I didn't. Well, mostly because something else appeared, and I started focusing on that instead of in the puzzle game that I was supposed to really play. I am sure. Well, I am right now promising myself I will finish these games one day, but maybe not. And you have to think, why is it that sometimes even we as puzzle lovers we hate puzzle games, or maybe we we forget about puzzle games, and there's many reasons for that. To me personally, sometimes puzzles are like work, and I guess that's something that happens to all of the people the that created those issues for us. That I guess this is a common perception of puzzles, and even it happens to the best of us, right? But it's but maybe all of that negative talk is not really helpful. Maybe we have to go back a bit, and maybe we have to admit, well, it's not that I hate puzzle games. I love puzzle games, but sometimes we have to. Maybe everything is about the perspective of how we treat these things, and maybe we need to go back to the Gordian knot. And I, I am still worried about the time of the talk, but let me rush a bit. And maybe we have to remember why, where, where were we when all of this started, and it was the story about Alexander the Great. But why do we tell that story anyway? Uh, in reality, the idea of that story is to to create a brand for Alexander the Great, to say that he was very smart. If you remember, what do we know about Alexander the Great other than this? Well, he was Aristotle's student. He built a big library. It really was part of his brand to seem like he was not just a big leader, he was also the smart one. So a lot of the intention behind this story was to say he was smart, and maybe all of that we need is a change in the way we tell the story. And let's tell. So let me tell you this story, but in another way. So what if I told you there's a way to solve any knot, any. It doesn't matter how complex you can imagine the knots. This guy knows how to solve it. And what does he do? He brings the sword and he can solve every knot. It doesn't matter how complex it is. So in this case, we are forgetting about the cheese. We are not calling it cheese, and we are calling this a solution. And well, why am I saying this is that if you try to tell this story and your goal is to say, well, Alexander the Great was very smart, the first problem with that is that it's very complex to describe a knot, uh, especially if you want to demonstrate that it's a very complex one. How are you going to describe a knot? And in those cases, this story started as an oral tale. So how could you describe a knot with just words? It's much easier to say that it was a very complicated knot. Even even in the Dom Camus talk last year, uh, he actually said how to solve the how Alexander solved that puzzle, but I didn't understand it. Sorry, because I am not familiar with how the knots work. Um, and really, it's very complicated to describe that. So in this case, that's the complication, right? You want to convince everyone that the puzzle was very complicated, but you can't really describe it. And because of that, I think that the best way to tell this story, if that's your goal, is to say that Alexander used his sword to solve the puzzle, because that's the best. That's a really incredible way to explain the solution. That's a solution that you can understand even if you don't know anything about knots. It doesn't really it doesn't really matter if you have a basic understanding or a complex understanding. It doesn't matter what knot you imagined when I was telling this story. You know that a sword is going to fix that problem. Um, I think that's the important part about that. It's if we stop imagining it as a cheese, as an unintended solution, it becomes a solution that you can easily explain. In this case, it's very complicated to explain the problem itself, but you can everyone can visualize someone grabbing a sword and ending the knot, in this case solving the knot. It doesn't really matter that you can't explain the problem too well. So, and maybe that's the goal I had with this talk, was to say maybe it's true, maybe people don't. It's not really that people hate puzzles, but maybe we could say people hate puzzles. But everybody loves a great solution, and in this case, everybody really. This story is popular because it's a case of somebody coming up with a great solution. In this case, it's a universal way to solve every knot. Um, that's the part that captivates people, right? That's the part that makes you want to explain this to school children or whatever. That's the part that communicates something, and it's all about the solution to the puzzle. And this is what makes it an interesting topic, I think. Um, maybe the question is, what's the point about that? I don't know, but maybe what I am going to say is that we should strive to create puzzles where you are proud about the solution. Maybe that's something that can help us when we are designing puzzles. That's an approach we could make. we could take in order to create a, if you want to create a new puzzle, maybe you can start to see it as a way to showcase a good solution. Maybe that's where the highlight should go. And I, I am going to end it with just this slide because we're running out of time. But I was saying that nobody talks about Portal as a puzzle game, and it wasn't true. This is in the page in the Wikipedia page for Portal, and it's really interesting how somebody had to go through the problem of building this really complete diagram of how in Portal you can use the portals to navigate across long distances using the momentum. Someone editing Wikipedia had to do this, had to draw this. But that's because someone was so captivated by this solution that they had to explain it. And that's really one of the first things that you can find in the page, in the Wikipedia page about Portal. It's really look at this solution, look at this great solution. Um, I had more slides about this, but I think I am going to end here because I'm really late, so I'm sorry about that. Hopefully, everyone, if there are more comments or questions, we can talk about them or maybe in the Discord. Let's see.
Thank you so much. I loved that take on that story. I was reminded of like one of the things that people say they love about like the Talos Principle games is that there's a lot of cheese in that game. You can like break most of the puzzles, and we do have a tendency to think about cheese as being a bad thing, but actually maybe it's just like a more creative, playful solution to the problem, and it's like thinking outside the box rather than it being something that is bad or shouldn't be allowed. So yeah, really fascinating. We've had lots of comments, people like really appreciating the things you're saying. And it's all right that you took a little bit longer because it's time for the break now anyway. Just wanted to check the chat, see what people are saying. Oh yeah, I also love that you basically made a Mario Maker level that was, it's like the trolley problem, but people die on one track, nobody dies on the other track, and they just have to solve a puzzle to pull the lever. And people don't
Yeah,
pull the lever.
actually, the level's name is the trolley problem, and that's the final test.
exactly. Everybody's saying thank you in the chat, so yeah, really appreciate it. All right, I'm looking forward to the reply to this talk next year. I'm hoping we're going to have like a conversation that like we get one part of the conversation every year for the rest of ThinkyCon. So people get thinking about what your response is going to be to this. Thank you, Vexorian. We'll leave that there and we'll take a break. It'll be a 15-minute break before the next talk. So yeah, thank you so much. And if there's any questions, please take them to the Discord where there is a thread where you can ask them. Right, thank you, Vexorian.
Okay, great. Thank you too.